The bed by the window had been empty for 4 days before anyone on the ward noticed. Not the bed itself. She was still in it, still breathing, still opening her eyes when the shift changed, and the lights came on, and the particular institutional morning of the Larkspur County Medical Center announced itself in the sounds of carts and voices and the fluorescent flicker of hallways coming to life. The bed was empty of visitors, of cards, of flowers, of the particular accumulating evidence that someone, somewhere, knew a person was here and was keeping track of whether they came back. There was no board above her bed with family names written in marker. There was no second cup of coffee brought from the cafeteria and left on the tray table, while someone sat in the plastic chair and told her what was happening outside. The plastic chair had not been moved. Nurse Patricia Wills knew this because she had been on this ward for 19 years, and she noticed chairs. She had been noticing the chair for 4 days and had not said anything to anyone because there was nothing in the protocol to say, and she was halfway through her shift on the 5th morning when she said it anyway, out loud, to the woman in the bed. "Somebody should be here," Patricia said. The woman opened her eyes. They were dark brown and very clear. "They will be," she said. She did not say who. Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from in the comments below. If this story moves you, please subscribe and stay with us until the very end. Because what that Marine discovered about why this woman had been alone in that room for 5 days will stay with you long after this video ends. We read every single comment. Logan Hayes, Staff Sergeant, United States Marine Corps, retired, had been in Larkspur, Colorado for 4 months when Rex pulled him left at the corner of 3rd and Millbrook instead of right toward the coffee shop they had been walking toward every morning for 16 weeks. Rex did not do this by accident. He had never done anything by accident. He had simply turned left with the authority of a dog who has decided where they are going and has reason. And Logan had followed, because Logan had learned across 4 years and 2 continents that when Rex decided something, the deciding was already done. Logan was 41 years old and occupied his height, 6'2", without advertising it, the way men carry size when it has been used for work rather than effect. He was lean through the face and jaw, with dark hair kept short by habit, and a nose that had been broken in Fallujah in 2016, and it healed with a slight rightward lean that his sister said gave him character, and that he had stopped thinking about entirely. His eyes were a deep, quiet green-gray, the color of the Colorado mountains in October, the color of something that has weathered things and is not made smaller by having weathered them, with a particular quality of eyes that move through a room in a way the rest of the face does not. Landing on things, assessing them. Moving on without apparent judgment, but missing nothing. He moved through the world at the pace of a man who has learned that urgency applied at the wrong moment costs more than it saves, and who has never been in a hurry since Helmand. He had done 3 deployments. 1 to the Sangin Valley with 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines, where the first 6 weeks had taught him more about the relationship between patience and survival than the previous 8 years of training combined. 1 to Fallujah with a battalion advisory unit, and a 3rd to a location in northeastern Syria that existed on no maps he was authorized to look at, and that he referred to, when he referred to it at all, as the 3rd one. He had come home from the 3rd one with a silver star he had not asked for, a medical retirement for the torn rotator cuff and the accumulated spinal compression that years of carrying weight in the field had deposited permanently in his lower back, and a German shepherd named Rex, who had been beside him for the final 14 months of the 3rd deployment, and who he had spent 9 months fighting to bring home. He had moved to Larkspur because it was small and honest, and because the altitude made the air feel like something you had to earn, which was a quality he found he needed in a landscape. He had not yet decided what came next. He was giving himself time to decide without rushing the deciding. Rex was a 6-year-old German Shepherd, 77 pounds, with a coat that ran deep black across his back and saddle, and faded to warm rust tan at his chest and lower legs. With eyes the color of dark honey that processed information with a speed that Logan sometimes found unsettling. The way you find unsettling something that is simply better at a thing than you are. His right ear had a lateral nick at its base from a wire-initiated device in Syria that had been close enough to change Rex's hearing slightly to the left and to give that ear a different resting angle from the right, so that in certain lights Rex looked permanently cocked toward a frequency only he could resolve. He had a way of moving through spaces that was less like walking and more like reading, the nose sweeping, the ears rotating independently, the amber eyes making passes across a room that covered it the way a trained observer covers it, top to bottom and corner to corner, no part unaccounted for. He had been through 9 months of bureaucratic adoption proceedings and 4 months of Larkspur mornings, and he had never, in all of that, pointed Logan somewhere that was not worth going. The Larkspur County Medical Center was a 2-story facility on Clement Avenue that smelled, from the entrance, of the particular combination of floor wax and recycled air that announces a hospital the way the smell of wood smoke announces a fire, specific, immediate, and evoking something larger than the thing itself. Rex led Logan through the automatic doors at the main entrance without pausing, which was the first thing that was unusual, and turned left into the main corridor with the certainty of a dog who has been given a destination, which was the second. Logan followed. A woman at the reception desk looked up and started to say something about service animal protocols, and then looked at Rex and appeared to decide that the protocols would keep. The corridor on the east wing of the second floor was quiet in the way hospital corridors are quiet in the middle of the morning. Not empty, not loud. The particular occupied silence of a place where important things are happening behind closed doors, and the hallway exists only as passage between them. Rex stopped at room 214. He stood outside the door with his nose at the gap at the bottom and went completely still, and then he pressed his broad head against the door and held it there, which was the particular behavior that meant something behind the door needed watching over. Logan knocked. Her name was Frances Alcott. She was 76 years old, and she had been in room 214 of the Larkspur County Medical Center for 5 days following a fall on the back steps of her house on Clement Avenue that had fractured her left hip and produced a secondary complication in her blood pressure that the attending physician had described, carefully, as requiring observation. She had a daughter in Phoenix who worked in hospital administration, which was the particular irony that Frances had noted to herself and to no one else. Because noting things to yourself was what you learned to do when there was no one else to note them to. The daughter's name was Kara. Kara had called on day 1 and on day 2, and had not called since, because Kara had a life that was full in the specific way that lives become full when they are organized around the assumption that the person at a distance is fine and will continue to be fine without specific attention. Frances had not called Kara. She had not wanted to be the kind of mother who needed calling about. Frances Alcott had been a high school English teacher in Larkspur for 27 years. She had taught apt literature and remedial reading and every grade between them, and she had the particular quality of a woman who has spent decades in rooms full of people who needed her to be competent, and was therefore, by habit, always competent, always upright, always more interested in what was happening to the person in front of her than in what was happening to herself. She had a garden behind her house on Clement Avenue, where she grew tomatoes and dahlias in volumes that exceeded what one person could use, and she had been bringing bags of both to neighbors and to the seniors' center on 4th Street since 1998. She had a cat named Austin who was being fed by the woman next door and who she thought about more often than she thought about Kara. She had not cried since the first night. She had simply been here, in the bed by the window, watching the light change on the Larkspur foothills, waiting for something she could not have named. Logan sat in the plastic chair that had not been moved. Rex lay on the floor beside the bed with his chin on his paws and his dark honey eyes turned up toward Francis. Not watchful, not alert, simply present in the particular way he was present when a person needed the specific ballast of being witnessed. She told Logan about the fall in 3 sentences. She spent longer on Austin. She asked him, with the precision of a woman who has spent decades teaching young people to be exact about language, what his dog's name was, and what he had done in the military, and where he had been. And she listened to the answers with the full, practiced attention of a teacher taking in information she intends to use. She asked him how long he had been in Larkspur and whether he had found it lonely, which was a question nobody had asked him in 4 months, and which he did not answer immediately, and then answered honestly. Sometimes, he said. She nodded as if he had said something she had expected. He did not know yet what he would find when he began, quietly, to ask questions of his own. Brandon Alcott was 44 years old, Francis's son, and he lived 40 minutes north of Larkspur in Castle Rock in a house with a 3-car garage and a lawn service and a homeowners association that met on the first Tuesday of every month. He was a regional sales director for a medical device company, which was a fact Logan filed in a particular way when he learned it, because it meant Brandon Alcott understood hospitals and understood the systems inside them, and had made a choice not to use that understanding on his mother's behalf. Brandon had called Frances once on day 1, which she had told Logan with the specific careful neutrality of a woman who has decided that naming a thing is not the same as complaining about it. He had not come. He had told Frances in that call that his schedule through the end of the month was extremely full and that she was in good hands and that he would try to get down when things opened up. He had said this from a house 40 minutes away. He drove newer vehicles than the ones his mother drove, and owned property she had helped him with the down payment on in 2009, and had never mentioned again. He had the particular confidence of a man who had organized his life around the assumption that the people behind him were fine, and who had stopped checking because the assumption had never been challenged. That assumption had been comfortable for 5 days in room 214. There was more. Logan found it by asking Patricia Wills, who had 19 years of institutional memory, and who told him, over coffee in the break room, that this was not the first time a room on this ward had gone without visitors, and that in her experience the people who stayed away often had reasons, but the reasons didn't make the staying away less what it was. She told him that Frances had been asking about discharge, and that the attending physician had concerns about sending her home without a support plan in place, and that the social work team had been trying to reach family for 4 days and had left 3 messages for Brandon that had not been returned. She told him this with the precise professional restraint of a woman who has been watching something wrong for 4 days and has been waiting for someone to agree that it is wrong. Rex was sitting beside Frances's bed when Logan came back. He had been sitting there, Patricia told him, since Logan left the room. He had not been invited to stay. He had simply stayed. Brandon Alcott arrived at 2:47 in the afternoon. Logan knew he was coming because Brandon's assistant had called the ward to confirm, which was the kind of call that contains, in its formality, an entire portrait of its maker. Brandon came through the door of room 214 in business casual clothing, with the manner of a man conducting a site visit. Organized, efficient, mentally already in the next conversation. He looked at his mother in the bed. He looked at Logan in the chair. He looked at Rex on the floor beside the bed, who looked back at him with the dark honey eyes that gave nothing away but noted everything, and whose posture had shifted from resting to the specific stillness that preceded an assessment. Logan, did not stand up. He introduced himself by name and rank and service record in the tone he used for briefings, complete, sequential, without heat, and told Brandon that he had been visiting Francis for 2 days, and that he had spoken with the social work team and with Francis's attending physician, and that the discharge plan being considered required a named support contact willing to commit to a specific schedule of check-ins and transportation to follow-up appointments, and that the team had been attempting to establish that contact for 4 days without success. He said this without looking away from Brandon and without any particular expression. Then he put a single sheet of paper on the tray table beside Brandon and told him it was a summary of the follow-up appointment schedule, the home modification recommendations from the occupational therapist, and the contact information for the Larkspur County Senior Services Coordinator, who had agreed to conduct a home assessment the following week. "Your mother has been in this room for 5 days, Logan said. "The chair you're standing next to hasn't been moved." Brandon looked at the chair. He looked at the paper. He looked at his mother, who was looking at him with the dark, clear eyes that had been looking at people clearly for 76 years, and that did not look away. Something shifted in Brandon Alcott's face. It was not dramatic. It was the particular small shift of a man who has been comfortable in his distance and has just been shown, with complete calm and complete specificity, exactly what that distance looks like to the person on the other side of it. "I'll be at the follow-up," he said. He said it to Francis, not to Logan. Francis said, "All right." Rex's tail moved once. Nobody spoke for a moment after that. The discharge plan was finalized on day 7. The home modification assessment was completed the following Tuesday. Brandon Alcott drove to Larkspur on a Saturday in the first week after Francis came home and stayed for 4 hours and ate lunch at her kitchen table and took photographs of the garden in the way of a person who has not paid attention to something for a long time and is trying to catch up. He came the following Saturday and the one after that, and by the 3rd visit the visits had found their shape, not performed, not obligated, just present, in the way that things find their shape when a person decides that the shape they had been comfortable with was not good enough. He was not Brandon Alcott redeemed in a single afternoon. He was Brandon Alcott adjusting, which is slower and less dramatic and more real. Francis's social worker filed a wellness flag in the county senior services system that ensured a monthly check-in through the following year. Patricia Wills stopped by Clement Avenue on a Thursday in March because she had been meaning to and had finally done it, and Francis gave her dahlias from the garden that she said were ahead of schedule and that Patricia said were the most beautiful things she had received in a long time. The plastic chair in room 214 has been moved on subsequent occupancies by people who came and sat in it, which is what chairs are for. 6 months after a Tuesday morning when Rex turned left at 3rd and Millbrook, Logan Hayes sat on the small back porch of his rental house in Larkspur in the long May evening with the foothills going amber in the last of the light and a cup of coffee on the rail, and Rex in the yard below doing the careful, interested patrol of a dog who has decided that this particular yard warrants ongoing investigation. Francis came for dinner on the 2nd Sunday of each month. She brought a book the first time, and they had talked about it until midnight, which was how Logan learned that a retired English teacher and a retired Marine have more in common than the world generally suggests, which is that they have both spent large portions of their lives paying very close attention to things that matter. His shoulders still ached on cold mornings. The lower back was the lower back. Neither of these things was the same as not being all right. He was all right. Sometimes miracles don't announce themselves at the door. Sometimes they turn left at a street corner for a reason that cannot be fully explained, except that the dog knew and the man had learned to trust the knowing. God does not place the right pair on the right street on the right morning by accident. He places them there because someone in a room by a window has been waiting, not passively, not pitifully, but with the specific patient faith of a woman who told a nurse that someone would come and meant it, and because faith of that particular kind has a way of being answered, not with thunder, but with footsteps in a hospital corridor and a dog pressing his head against a door. There are rooms in every town where a chair has not been moved. There are people in those rooms who have survived a great deal and who deserve someone sitting in that chair more than they deserve anything else in the world. Pay attention to the dog. Follow when it turns. Walk into the rooms you are led to. Because the leading is never by accident, and the rooms are never empty of need. If France's story moved you, share it with someone who needs to be reminded that showing up, just showing up, without preparation or performance, is one of the most powerful things a person can do. Leave a comment and tell us where you're watching from, and if you have ever sat in a plastic chair beside someone who needed you there, or if you have ever been the person in the bed who needed someone to come. We want to hear from you. Your story matters, and it may be the one that sends someone back to a room they have been staying away from. If you believe in stories of loyalty, service, and the simple grace of presence, please subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next one. May God bless you, protect your family, and give you the courage to walk through the doors that need walking through. Because on the other side of every one of them, someone is waiting.